So I'm going to give you 6 reasons why I don't support Drag Queen Story Hour. Now, quick disclaimer, I don't hate anybody. I'm critical of ideas, specifically ideas that have the potential to harm, in particular, in this case, children. So, and I don't believe I even have to do this, but let me explain to you why I'm not a homophobe or a bigot, as that's a common insult slung towards people like myself who are critical of this. Number one, I don't care what adults do in the privacy of their own home or what they choose as their form of adult entertainment. That's their business. And number two, homophobe implies that I'm afraid of them. I'm not afraid of drag queens. Now, this might be fair to say. I'm afraid of what the influence and the impact will be on children. So I guess it's fair to say I am afraid in that regard, but I'm not afraid of the people themselves that are doing drag queen. So that's a misrepresentation. It's kind of a cheap shot that really has no meaning. And like I said, if it ever came down to, if we dropped the gloves and we started fighting, I think I could handle myself pretty well against a drag queen. I mean, unless they started clawing me with their nails or something. But so I don't hate anybody. I'm not afraid of them. So I guess to address the bigot usually refers to someone who is unreasonably stuck in their opinion because of a deep-seated belief, and they're just not going to budge regardless of the evidence given to them. They're stuck. That's not me, because I'm arguing really good points here. I think I'm being pretty reasonable, but I'll let you decide by the end of the video. So with those things out of the way, let's go through the 6 reasons why I do not support Drag Time Story Hour. Number one, its provocative nature. It's historically known to be this exaggerated, seductive, and often sexual form of entertainment, and also geared towards adults. And in fact, the adult entertainment industry dishes out awards to drag queens. Now, here's an example out of Australia where people, and probably parents, who were understandably upset when the media forgot to mention the full stage name of their Drag Queen Story Hour performer, who, while telling stories to kids, called himself Diamond, but by night went by the stage name Diamond Goodrem. Goodrem obviously being a sexual reference. It seems they also forgot to mention that Mr. DQ won an award in the adult entertainment industry. And the argument I hear all the time is that not all drag queens are sexual, that there are some who are well-intentioned that just want to make kids happy and bring them joy. And anybody who tries to suggest that they're full of it is automatically deemed bigoted, homophobic, and all that. Now, I will acknowledge that some drag queens, for example, the one that performs for children in my local area, they're not as sexually revealing, so there's no genitals hanging out, there's no cleavage, there's no butt cheeks showing. And this picture here, it legitimately looks like an attempt to look like Elsa from Frozen. But just because a few drag queens take away the sexual aspect to it, that doesn't discount for what drag is as a trend, as adult entertainment. And, that'd be like saying strippers do have the ability to not be sexual. Well, I would say, yeah, of course, but they're still strippers.
I have absolutely no idea why you would want that to influence your child. Would you want a stripper or a porn star to influence your child? It makes no sense at all. A drag queen performs in a nightclub for adults. There is a lot of filth that goes on, a lot of sexual stuff that goes on. And backstage, there's a lot of nudity, sex, and drugs. So I don't think that this is an avenue you would want your child to explore.
Number 2, kids are not reliable for distinguishing between truths and falsehoods. This is why when our children get scared of monsters in the closet, it's the parent's job to convince them that the monster under the bed or in the closet, they're not real, because we have the developed rationality. That's our job as parents. So when a little boy is sitting there in front of a drag queen and he's thinking, I know this isn't a woman because, well, kids are smart. Women don't look like cartoons, first of all. But he's also thinking, This guy's breath smells like my dad's. He's got an Adam's apple. He sounds like a dude. Kids would put that together. So the normal reaction to that for a kid should be, this isn't normal. This is out of place. But what's being trained to them, what they're being trained to think, is that this is normal, that this is acceptable. They talk all about tolerance and acceptance, that this is their aim. And therefore, if this kid ever felt the gravity towards playing with dolls or feeling cute wearing a dress, it creates a snowball effect of these kids struggling with their sexuality, things that they shouldn't even be thinking about as kids.
I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. You know, my upbringing was pretty much a typical California upbringing in Los Angeles in the early 40s. It wasn't really anything remarkable. At least not until my dad began to take me over and drop me off at my grandma's house. Grandma was a seamstress and made dresses. And I became very curious about her work, and my curiosity led to her making me a purple chiffon dress that she made just to fit my perfect little 4-year-old body. You know, at first it felt really exciting to have somebody telling me how wonderful and cute I was. But what I didn't realize was happening is the second Grandma began to tell me how cute I looked in that purple dress, what she was really saying was that there was something radically wrong with the little boy that I really was. And so that begins this sort of creepy kind of psychological and emotional destruction that starts with inside a young boy, 4 years old, who doesn't know what the consequences are going to be about putting on a dress at 4 years old.
So reason number 3 is social political activism for the 2S LGBTQ AI plus community should not be thrust upon children. Again, these are adult ideologies. And I think adults have the freedom to explore all that as much as they want. But when they have an agenda, while telling kids stories, that makes you a groomer. And before anybody gets all up in arms about the word groomer, let me define groomer for you. This is the Urban Dictionary definition. It's someone who builds a relationship, trust, and emotional connection with a child or young person so they can manipulate, exploit, and abuse them. Now, you may think, well, I'm not abusing them, but if your influence causes them to later down the road snowball into an identity crisis, which we already know people commit suicide over, we're seeing young kids having surgery, removing body parts and taking puberty blockers that are irreversible, by the way. So if you're one of the spokes in this wheel that's disguised as innocent storytelling, then yes, you are abusing these children psychologically. And no, it's not about what you're saying to these kids. Now, there could be things being said to these kids in other areas that I'm not aware of, but that's not what this is about. This is more so about what you're not saying. And part of what you're not saying is that this is an activist push. And here's an article from it's written by an actual drag queen who reads stories to kids, where he says halfway through his article that drag queen story time is appropriate for children. But the bigger question is why? Why not have a clown read to children or someone dressed as a cucumber? Why does it have to be a drag queen? Well, it's for the same reason drag queens became popular in the 1960s and 70s. Who we love and the gender we conform to have both remained unchallenged for most of human existence. It's only been in the last 50 years when things have begun to shift. And the major catalyst for this change has been drag queens, simply because they are the epitome of different. Not only are they men dressing as women, but they are men acting like women. Sometimes they don't even bother to act, they just be themselves. Men dressing like women, acting like men. This is interesting to note because a majority of drag queens don't want to be women. They just want to be a little different. But back in the 20th century, drag queens were the political activists, standing on the front line with their brothers and sisters, marching for gay rights and freedoms, and their political activism shook up the social norms. He goes on to say world-renowned drag entertainer RuPaul Charles, in an article by the New York Times Magazine, says drag is the mocking of identity. It's all a nudge, nudge, wink, wink, Rue says. We never believe this is who we are. That is why drag is a revolution, because we're mocking identity. We're mocking everyone. And this brings me to reason number 4. They're not only admitting that they're activists, people who are attempting to shake up the social norms, but they're admitting to being a mockery. That is the nature of drag performances. You know, in a society where we have feminists just salivating for any opportunity to point out women's oppression, where the heck are you? How is this not the blackface of womanhood? See, I have a son, and I'm trying to raise him to not only respect women, but to honor and to celebrate the differences that women have compared to men. What these drag queens are portraying, they're saying they're women, but that's not what women look like at all. Women aren't exaggerated, silly, blue-haired cartoon characters. They're not something to be worn as a costume. So for me, when you're openly admitting that you're mocking people's identities, and specifically women, I think you're a terrible person. I do. Reason number 5. Drag queens, which are primarily gay men, are not qualified to tell parents what's best for their kids because they chose not to procreate with their lifestyle. We did. Now, normally I don't like to argue from authority. This idea that just because you don't have experience or education that you can't have an opinion on something and make a good argument. I don't like doing that. That's why I don't think this reason would stand alone as an argument. But what I've seen a lack of is a good coherent argument as to why drag queens believe that what they do adds any value whatsoever to the children storytime experience. I just haven't heard it. So what has to be wrong with a person that rejects procreation and then they feel it necessary to make it their life mission to influence other people's kids in their activism? To me, that's ignorant. It's disrespectful to families who chose a different path than you did. Reason number 6, there's no way anyone can know that these men are not being aroused by wearing women's clothes. Now, I'm not saying every drag queen is getting aroused in front of these kids, but drag and its sexual characteristics in our culture, it's a perfect avenue and perfect cover-up for men who do get aroused by wearing women's clothing. We call these cross-dressers. And this isn't a new discovery. But as a parent, knowing that this really does happen, and some men really do get aroused by wearing women's clothing, this should be a huge flag of concern. Now, people will say, oh, you're conflating cross-dressers who are typically straight men with drag queens who are usually gay men. It's not conflating because there's a common denominator. They're both biological men. And I was chatting with someone about this earlier this week, and at one point I said, I really believe a man can be attracted to anything he puts his mind to, whether it's an object, an animal, whatever. We're messed up. And it's all to do with how much time we let our brain feed on it. So if we keep feeding it and feeding it, the harder it becomes to pull away from it. It becomes an addiction. And we're born with, and I would argue we're designed with, 3 protective mechanisms that are meant to help us. The first one is our moral conscience. Is what we're doing right? You know, whether it's socially or personally. What's the answer? And being honest about what that answer is. The second mechanism is our intellect, which is acknowledging the harm certain decisions have or could have. And the third is twofold. It's humility and self-control. Having the ability to turn our perspectives around when our conscience and our intellect are telling us that this isn't the best move. And so if we're ignoring that, if somewhere along the way we're ignoring the moral conscience, we're not being guided by morality and we're not being guided intellectually, then that leaves us with the the unwillingness to use humility and self-control. So those are my 6 reasons why I don't support drag queen story time for kids. But listen, guys, if you deeply disagree with the things I'm saying, if you're angry with this video, let me know why in the comments below. If anything, I'd be happy that this at least started a conversation, because I think this conversation is important. All right. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.